what is Auto for Impact? How did you guys get started with it? And what is the impact metric that you guys really look at?
Auto for Impact is a 1700-kilometer journey from Bangalore to Bombay in an auto rickshaw. It's a campaign that aims to increase awareness of and raise funds for girl child education. We're doing this campaign in collaboration with an NGO called Project Nanikali that focuses solely on girl child education. And the timing of the campaign came about because of the COVID-19 situation, because of the fact that the country was really going through a crisis. And this was a sector that we identified as something that was underserved in the COVID-19 narrative. And we wanted to make an impact in this sector because we knew that schools were being closed. We knew that digital access was not available, and Project Nanikali was genuinely doing good work in this space. We ended up with 15 sponsors, and we raised a ballpark of around 30 lakh rupees.
While the lockdown for us was staying at home and having the comfort of working from wherever we wanted to, we were watching migrant laborers walk home. We were reading stats on the kind of effect the lockdown was having on girl children. Like 70 years of education was being undone. And I guess because both of these things were on our minds, the idea of creating an impact sort of came from this mindset, from feeling helpless about not being able to do anything. And while we were on call, we discussed this company called The Adventurists, who just happened to create, conduct auto rickshaw rides throughout India. And the two of us love traveling, and because simultaneously something like this was on our minds, very organically we happened to marry these two things. We knew we wanted to create impact, and we knew that we kind of wanted to travel.
So tell us about this next steps you did. Once you knew that you wanted to create impact, you knew that you wanted to travel, and you had this team of friends that you had put together.
One of the first things that we realized was that we were really nobody. I mean, if we approached a company and told them, look, we're a group of college kids and we want to do this thing, I mean, the first question they'd ask is, who are you? And we didn't have an answer for that. So we kind of wanted to build up our credibility to a place where we could then go and ask the company and tell them that, look, this is who we are and this is what we draw our credibility from. Now will you help us? So to do that, our strategy was to kind of start off with the easiest sells first, right? What is the organization that we can partner with that would be most agreeable to helping us, to partnering with us? And the first one we thought of was the NGO, right? Because what's the sell there? The sell there is that, look, we're going to do all this work. We're going to work for months and build a campaign, collect money and donate it to you, right? And what are we asking you from? Pretty much, what are we asking from you? Pretty much nothing. We're just going to do it in collaboration with you, and that's how it is. But an important consideration at this point was, which is the NGO we're going to support? Because it's easy to go and tell an NGO we're going to help you out, but the entire campaign is built on that NGO, on that cause, right?
And their work, right?
And their work. So it was very, very important for us to choose an NGO, which when we call a company and tell them, look, we're doing this in collaboration with this NGO, we believe ourselves that the NGO is doing great work. That should never be a problem. So we chose Project Nanikali and we reached out to them. You kind of have to build up credibility, right? And the first few cells are the most important to do that, because especially in the CSR segment, if you talk to somebody and tell them about Project Nanikali, invariably they'll at least know of the organization. The next, organic cell that kind of comes in through this is the auto rickshaw. So we reached out to TVS, we spoke to them. It was a very lucid pitch. We told them exactly what they'd get back from us. We told them exactly what we want from them, which was nothing, an auto rickshaw. I mean, for a company that manufactures auto rickshaw, it's really peanuts, right? So we did that, and that was, they said yes. And that we weren't expecting that, but looking back now, it makes sense because the pitch was so simple. Give us an auto rickshaw. We'll take it from there. We don't want anything else from you. We'll take it from there. We'll ensure that you have a good marketing, output from this. We'll ensure that it makes impact. We'll do the entire thing. Just give us one auto rickshaw. And that was the first two pitches. Now, when we reach out to a company, we can tell them, we're Auto for Impact. We're doing this, this campaign in collaboration with this really superb NGO called Project Nanikali, along with a company that you probably have heard of, TVS, right? Everyone knows about TVS. So that was kind of, the first two cells, and that creates the foundation to pitch to any other company going forward.
Once the two easiest cells were done, this is how we sort of start moving from nobodies to Auto for Impact. Right now, Auto for Impact isn't a bunch of college grads who are trying to do something. Auto for Impact is a team in collaboration with a great NGO, with one of the best, auto manufacturers in the country. So this is when we started forging our identity, so to speak. This is when we started reaching out to every single company that we could think of in order to get money from them. What worked for us was being dynamic, was not sticking to an idea that we thought would work and just going for it. In any case, we wrote tons of emails, didn't work. Emails have a really, really low response rate from what we learned. So we changed that strategy. The next step was to send WhatsApps. Again, if there are 500 WhatsApps to send out, they didn't go out on the same day. They were longer, they were shorter, they were very dynamic in nature. When that didn't work out, we started calling people. And I think the final strategy that we sort of the standard, procedure of operation that we settled on was to combine sort of all three of them, to write them an email, then write them a WhatsApp, and if that doesn't work, straight up calling people. And this sounds, great to say, once you're outside of the campaign, but when you're doing it, it's a lot of email writing, it's a lot of long nights. And what I cannot emphasize enough is how much resilience played a role in what we did.
One of the first cold calls that I did, and that we weren't even thinking about cold calling people. Like, we just had a crazy idea. Okay, why not? Nobody's responding to us. Why not just call them? So one of the first people we called was the founder of Chumbak. And it was so incredibly intimidating for me to just pick up the phone and talk to this guy whose stores I see all across India, and tell him, "Hi, I'm Vidur. I'm from Auto for Impact." Of course, he doesn't know what Auto for Impact is. And can I take 2 minutes of your time and just talk to you about this campaign that we're doing? And I'm not even kidding now. Looking back then, it really required some amount of courage to be able to do that and just pick up the phone and talk to him. And that call didn't go away. It was one of the first calls. I didn't even know what to say to him. I probably messed it up. But the point was that to do this, you have to make that first call.
A company has a greater chance of responding to us if what we're doing aligns with what they're creating. So if it's girl child education, and education is such a big deal, if we reach out to classmate, there is a greater probability of them responding than let's say, a shoe manufacturer.
As I understand, most firms have sort of historic partnerships in their CSR and how they deal with their CSR. So most of the companies that you might have called it been like, oh no, we already do it to this organization every year. We've set our CSR strategy for the next 5 years. Was there ever a time that you had to change a lot of people's minds about where they should be putting their CSR money?
So one, I guess, loophole that we realized to this structure was startups who had just started being profitable, which is also a loophole because most startups are not profitable. So we sort of did our research into, which company has declared profit and which company founded in the last 5 years has declared profit, which sort of gave us a, greater probability of this being somebody who's young and someone who's not sort of set relationships already. So Cashfree was one of the, one such company that declared profits and was extremely young. And they happened to be our first CSR partner.
I want to talk about the auto itself, right? So as I understand, you guys knew you wanted to travel, you wanted to use an auto, you got TVS on board. As soon as TVS came on board, they gave you, I'm assuming, a yellow and green auto, right? Did you start off thinking you'd have a really funky colored auto?
Because when we initially approached the Soul Store, who ended up being our creativity partners, we approached them to be our CSR sponsors because, we thought that they're an artsy company, they might be into something, funky like this. And that was our thought when approaching them. We asked them just for money and they said no. And because we'd done prior research into, who they were and what they did and the sort of CSR campaigns that they had conducted in the past, the second question that we immediately pitched to them was, okay, you can't give us money, fair enough, it's been a hard year. Can you then be our, creativity partners? Can you lend us one of your t-shirt designers? Can you cover the physical costs of the artist and the paint and everything that comes with it? When TVS gave us this auto, it was great, but it was, a plain black canvas. And the idea was that every pitch that we did, we tried to find a middle ground that worked for us as well as them, and that's how we converted our no's to yeses, and that's what worked for Soul Store. And the idea that they were able to help us in any ways that we could and that they could, and we were able to use their resources to the best of our advantage, is what ended us having that auto.
What did you guys plan? There were 4 of you in the auto. Just talk us through the details of it also as much as you can. Just take us through the journey of leaving from Bangalore.
Left from Vidhan Sagar on the morning of April 10th. It was 3 of us in the auto, Sita, Anshul and I. Anshul and I were the ones driving the auto and, kind of figuring out that aspect of it. And there was also a support car with 2 more of our teammates that was kind of, tailing us around everywhere. It was such a surreal experience. The intent was to, go past and touch more important cities, a bigger number of important cities and towns. So Bangalore to Bombay is part of the Golden Quadrilateral. It's one straight route. There is really nothing to see on that route. It's a great road. You reach there really fast, but there's nothing to see on that route. There are no towns, there are no cities, there are no people. And we specifically chose this route that went through the Western Ghats so that we were able to touch more people. Get through Chikmagalur, Ooty, Honavar, Goa, all of these places. Goa, for instance, doesn't come on the Bangalore map. So that was kind of the concept of it. And it was also, a narrative aspect where this tiny little auto, is traveling through the Western Ghats, reaching the tallest peak in Karnataka, Mulayangiri, right? It's so surreal to be in that vehicle, in that space, of these massive mountains, both sides. You're looking at these huge peaks. You're traveling on those roads, and it's a great narrative as well. So that was kind of, the 2 reasons why we chose to do it this way.
You guys have set on your journey. You've passed by the Western Ghats. You've reached Goa. And the COVID and COVID and the second wave is picked up across India. What's going through your minds? What's happening with the money right now? What would have been the ideal case when you reached Bombay?
So on that front, we ensured that whenever a company was donating money, they were donating it directly to the NGO. So us stopping in Goa or us stopping anywhere on the route would not have affected that. In a similar vein, most of the money was raised before we even started off our journey in Bangalore. So the money aspect was really, I think, well handled in terms of the fact that it went to the end person. But the other part of it was that we were physically traveling, right? And we were in Goa and we were looking at these COVID cases of India, and it's just going crazy. Day after day, it's insane. And an important reason why we wanted to reach Mumbai was to give the auto to a family in need. The auto was finally to be donated to this family, and the girl of the family was a part of the Nani Kali program. She was a part of the Nani Kali program. So that was an important reason for us to reach Mumbai. So we thought about it and we realized that, okay, look, this is really as far as it goes right now. In solidarity with the situation that's happening with the country, it doesn't make sense to be traveling in this auto rickshaw, from Goa to Bombay, through Maharashtra, to the key part of where this is happening. So we parked the auto in Goa in a naval base over there, as safe as it can be. And the aim is that once COVID, I really hope gets to a manageable state. The aim is to then continue the journey and continue from Goa to Bombay and give the auto finally to that family.
The 30 lakhs that you've raised, and the same question that you ask of the NGOs, how much is going to the women? How much did any of it go into your operational expenses at all? Or all of it directly to Nani Kali?
So the 30 lakhs, the figure that we're telling you, is entirely in Project Nani Kali's account right now. So we don't picture anywhere into that situation. And the next obvious question is then, how did we fund this for ourselves, right? So we happen to find ways, like I said, right, to finding a middle ground for companies where what they were offering fit in with what we needed. So Oyo came on board as our accommodation sponsor. Soul Store came on board as our artwork sponsor. There's a company, Needle Innovision, who came on board as our fuel sponsor, who just wanted to pay for the fact that we were traveling and fuel costs money. Then Wildcraft came on board as our apparel sponsor, because when you're outdoors, you need things, you need protection, and so we found partners who were willing to sort of fund us in a way, and this is how we were able to separate, the money that was going to them and the product that was coming to us.
If you were to talk to somebody tomorrow who asked you, how did you do something? Like, to think about 30 lakhs now is a huge number. To think about Bangalore to Bombay is a huge journey. And to think about just four people out of college doing it is, I would say you wouldn't be able to do it. What would you say to other, let's say, people our age that would be interested in sort of creating impact, social impact at a time like this, but don't know where to start really?
Every, any campaign that you do, it starts with an idea or a cause or something that you believe in. And I guess what worked for us was that all of us were really aligned on the fact that we wanted to create this particular kind of impact. Long nights are hard, but they're slightly less hard if the people you're working with are people you enjoy hanging out with in the first place.